Stephen Booker woke up to screaming, sharp, panicked. The kind that cuts through walls and shatters sleep like glass. Get out of my house. His eyes snapped open. Unfamiliar ceiling, unfamiliar room. His brain scrambled to catch up. Where was he? Then it hit him. Helen Greenwood's guest room. His boss. The Christmas party. The long drive to Weddington because she was too drunk to see straight. He stumbled into the hallway. Still groggy. Still wearing yesterday's clothes. Helen stood at the top of the stairs in her bathrobe, phone pressed to her ear, eyes wide with terror, not recognition, not relief, just pure fear. Ma'am. Yes, there's a man in my house. I don't know how he got here. Miss Greenwood, it's me. It's Stephen. You asked me to stay away from me. She backed up the stairs like he was a stranger, like he was dangerous. I don't remember that. I don't remember anything. That's when Stephen heard them sirens, getting closer, getting louder. His heart dropped into his stomach. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. He'd done the right thing. Drove her home safe. Stayed because she begged him not to drive back in the dark. Slept fully clothed in the guest room, door open, phone charging on the nightstand. But none of that mattered now, because in 60 seconds, police would crash through that door. And Stephen Booker, black single father, facilities manager, church-going man who'd never hurt anyone, would become exactly what America expected him to be, a suspect. But before those police cars screeched to a stop outside Helen Greenwood's mansion, before Stephen's world exploded into handcuffs and accusations, before his daughter's screams echoed down the stairwell of their apartment, there was a party, 12 hours earlier. Stephen's phone buzzed. He glanced down at the screen. Miss Rosa, sending another photo of Amara curled up on the couch, her favorite stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin. He smiled, despite himself, then looked back up at the Ritz-Carlton ballroom. God, he hated these things. The Greenwood Financial Christmas party was all crystal chandeliers and open bars. Executives in designer suits, laughing too loud at jokes that weren't funny. Stephen stood near the service corridor in his navy suit, the only one he owned, bought on sale at Men's Warehouse 3 years ago for Keisha's funeral. He'd loosened his tie an hour ago. His feet hurt, and he was counting down the minutes until he could leave. Stephen! Yo, you good? Marcus from maintenance walked past with a plate of shrimp. You look like you're at a wake, bro. Feel like it too, Stephen muttered. Man, just grab some food, have a drink, smile at the white folks, and bounce. Stephen shook his head. Can't. Amara's sitter charges by the hour. Marcus laughed. Say less. I feel you. He clapped Stephen on the shoulder and disappeared back toward the buffet. Stephen checked his watch. 11:23. Stephen, there you are. His stomach dropped. Helen Greenwood stumbled past the ice sculpture. An elaborate swan that probably cost more than Stephen's rent. Her designer heels betraying her with every step. Her blonde hair was falling out of its fancy updo. Mascara smudged at the corners of her eyes. She grabbed onto a cocktail table to steady herself, nearly knocking over someone's champagne flute. Miss Greenwood, you okay? Stephen moved toward her instinctively, that same protective reflex that kicked in whenever Amara got too close to the street. I'm fine. Helen waved her hand dismissively, then immediately contradicted herself by swaying dangerously to the left. Where's my purse? I need my keys. Stephen's eyes widened. Your keys? Ma'am, you're not driving tonight. Of course I'm driving. I drove here, didn't I? That was 7 hours and about 12 drinks ago. Helen squinted at him like she was trying to bring him into focus. Are you judging me, Stephen? No, ma'am. I'm trying to keep you alive. He glanced around the ballroom. Where the hell was her assistant? Her executive friends? Anybody? but the party was winding down. People were already filing toward the exits, laughing in clusters, completely oblivious to the fact that the VP of Operations was about to wrap her Lexus around a telephone pole. "Miss Greenwood, let me call you an Uber." "No!" She lurched forward, grabbed his arm for balance. I don't do Ubers. Strangers. Can't trust strangers." Stephen looked down at her manicured hand, gripping his sleeve, then back up at her unfocused eyes. He was doing the math in his head. If she got behind the wheel and killed someone, could he have stopped it? Would he be responsible? Would it come back on him somehow? Everything always came back on him somehow. "Okay," he said quietly. Helen blinked at him, suddenly docile. "You will?" "Yeah. Where do you live?" "Weddington. You know where that is?" Stephen's heart sank. Weddington was 45 minutes south, deep in the wealthy suburbs where houses had gates and lawns that looked like country clubs. But what choice did he have? "Yeah," he said. "I know where it is." What Stephen didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, as he helped Helen toward the parking garage, was that in 12 hours, this simple act of decency would be twisted into something monstrous. That doing the right thing would become the worst mistake of his life. Helen's keys hit the marble floor of the parking garage like a gunshot. Stephen watched them skitter under her silver Lexus, the kind of car that cost more than he made in 2 years. "I got it, Miss Greenwood." He bent down, scooped them up. The key fob was heavy in his hand, leather and chrome, still warm from her palm. Helen leaned against the car, one hand pressed to her forehead. Just give them to me." "Ma'am, I can't do that." "Stephen, I'm your boss, and I'm not letting you drive." His voice was firm but careful. Always careful. "Please, let me take you home." She stared at him for a long moment. Mascara smudged, lipstick faded, then something in her crumpled. "Fine. Whatever. Just get me out of here." Stephen unlocked the passenger door, helped her inside. She collapsed into the leather seat like a puppet with cut strings. He closed the door gently, walked around to the driver's side, and slid behind the wheel. The Lexus was immaculate. New car smell. Not a single fast food wrapper or empty coffee cup. Stephen adjusted the seat, the mirrors, his hands at 10 and 2 like he was taking a driver's test. "Address?" he asked. Helen mumbled something that sounded like GPS. "It's in the GPS." Stephen found her home address saved in the navigation. 847 Brentwood Estate Lane, Weddington, NC. Distance, 42 miles. Estimated time, 51 minutes. He exhaled slowly and pulled out of the parking garage. The first 20 minutes were quiet, except for Helen's occasional sighs. They left uptown Charlotte behind, the skyscrapers and streetlights fading into darkness. Soon, it was just 2-lane country roads. No lights, except the Lexus's headlights cutting through the night. Stephen's phone buzzed. "Miss Rosa, Amara's out cold. I can stay late if you need. No extra charge tonight, mijo." He wanted to cry. Instead, he typed back, "Thank you. I'll be there soon." "Stephen?" Helen's voice was thick, slurred. "Yes, ma'am? You ever feel like you did everything right and still ended up alone?" Stephen glanced at her. She was staring out the window at the darkness rushing past. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "my husband left me." She laughed, bitter and sharp. 6 months ago. Said I worked too much. Said I cared more about quarterly reports than our marriage." She turned to look at Stephen. "Miss Greenwood, I don't think. He was right." She slumped back in her seat. "I have this big house. This big empty house with nobody in it. Just me and my Scotch collection." Stephen kept his eyes on the road. The GPS showed 30 more minutes. "You have a daughter, right?" Helen asked. Yes, ma'am. Amara. She's 8. Her mother died when Amara was born. Helen went quiet. Then, I'm sorry. Thank you. So, you're doing it alone. Just you and her. Just us. That's beautiful, Stephen. You're a good man. You know that? You're a really good guy. Stephen's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Something about the way she said it made his skin crawl. Not because she was being inappropriate, she wasn't, but because he'd learned a long time ago that being called a good guy by white people usually meant they were about to ask him for something he didn't want to give. The GPS announced, "In 1 mile, turn right onto Brentwood Estate Lane." Helen's neighborhood appeared like something from a movie. Iron gates, stone pillars, houses set back from the road behind walls of trees. Stephen turned onto her street, and his stomach tightened. These weren't houses. These were compounds. "It's the one at the end," Helen mumbled. "The gate code is 1107. My wedding anniversary. Ironic, right?" Stephen punched in the code. The gates swung open silently, and as he pulled into that circular driveway, as Helen's mansion loomed ahead with its dark windows and security lights, Stephen Booker had no idea he was driving straight into a trap that would cost him everything. Stephen put the Lexus in park and stared up at Helen's house. House wasn't even the right word. This was a estate, all stone and glass, landscape lights illuminating perfectly trimmed hedges, a fountain in the middle of the driveway that probably cost more than his entire apartment building. "We're here, miss." Greenwood. Helen didn't move. Her head was tilted against the window, eyes half closed. "Miss Greenwood? Hmm?" She blinked slowly. "Oh, home. Okay." Stephen got out, walked around, and opened her door. She nearly fell out of the seat. He caught her by the elbow, gentle, controlled, hyper-aware of where his hands were. "Easy. I got you." "My hero," she slurred, and laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. Getting her to the front door took 5 minutes. She fumbled with her clutch, dropped it, picked it up, fumbled again. Stephen wanted to help, but didn't dare touch her purse. Finally, she pulled out a key, and somehow managed to unlock the door. The inside was just as intimidating as the outside. Marble floors, high ceilings, a chandelier that looked like it belonged in a museum. Everything was white and cream and expensive. "Okay, Miss Greenwood, you're home safe. I'm gonna head upstairs," she interrupted, grabbing his arm. I can't do the stairs." Stephen looked at the curved staircase leading to the second floor. Then at Helen, who could barely stand. He didn't have a choice. "All right, lean on me." They took the stairs one at a time. Helen stumbled on the 3rd step, and he caught her around the waist. Professional, quick, letting go the second she was stable. His heart was pounding. Every muscle in his body was tense. "Which room?" he asked, when they reached the top. "End of the hall." "The big one." "They're all big, but that one's mine." Her bedroom was massive. King-sized bed with about 1,000 pillows. Stephen guided her to the edge of the bed, and she collapsed onto it with a groan. "There you go." He stepped back immediately, hands up like he was proving something to an invisible camera. "You good?" "Shoes," she mumbled. "Get these damn shoes off." Stephen hesitated, then knelt down and carefully unbuckled her heels. He set them on the floor beside the bed and stood back up. "Okay, you're all set. I'm gonna—" "Stephen." Her voice was softer now, almost childlike. She was lying on her side, eyes barely open. "Don't go yet. Miss Greenwood, I really need to get back. It's so late." She waved vaguely at the window. "It's so dark out there. Those roads, no lights. You're tired. What if you fall asleep? What if you crash?" Stephen checked his phone. 12:43 a.m. She wasn't wrong. He was exhausted. And those back roads were dangerous. He'd seen 2 deer on the drive here. I'll be fine. Guest room. Helen pointed toward the door. Downstairs, 1st floor. Nice bed. You can leave early, before the sun even comes up. Just, please, I don't want you dying on my conscience. Stephen stood there, torn. Every instinct screamed at him to leave. Get in that Lexus. Drive back to Charlotte. Get Amara from Miss Rosa. Forget this night ever happened. But what if she was right? What if he did crash? Who would take care of Amara? And if he left now and something happened to Helen, if she choked in her sleep? If she fell in the bathroom, would that come back on him too? Okay, he heard himself say. Okay. Just for a few hours. I'll leave at 6. Helen smiled, her eyes already closing. You're a good man, Stephen Booker. Those words. Again, Stephen walked downstairs to the guest room, his stomach churning with unease. The room was pristine, expensive sheets, paintings on the wall, a bathroom attached. He didn't touch anything except his phone, which he plugged in to charge. He texted Miss Rosa, running late. Be there first thing in the morning. So sorry. Then he lay down on top of the covers, fully clothed, shoes still on, and stared at the ceiling. He didn't know it yet, but he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. Because in 6 hours, Helen Greenwood would wake up with no memory of inviting him to stay. And when she found a black man sleeping in her house, her panic would destroy everything Stephen had spent 8 years building. Stephen was dreaming about Amara, her laugh. The way she said, "Daddy," when she wanted pancakes, when the voices yanked him back to consciousness. Multiple voices, heavy footsteps, the creak of floorboards outside the guest room door. His eyes opened slowly, groggily. For a second, he forgot where he was. Then he remembered Helen's house, the guest room. He'd only meant to sleep for a few hours. The door swung open. Stephen's heart stopped. Helen stood in the doorway in her silk bathrobe, blonde hair pulled back, a coffee mug in her hands. But she wasn't alone. Behind her, filling the doorway, filling the hallway, were 4 police officers in full uniform, hands hovering near their holsters. Stephen jerked upright on the bed, still fully clothed from last night, his mind scrambling to make sense of what he was seeing. Miss Greenwood? That's him, Helen said, her voice cold and steady. She took a slow sip of her coffee. Her eyes locked on Stephen, like he was something she'd found crawling in her house. That's the man I woke up to find in my home. Wait, what? Stephen swung his legs off the bed, hands up instinctively. Miss Greenwood, you asked me to stay. Last night you, on your feet, hands where we can see them. 2 officers rushed forward before Stephen could finish his sentence. His body moved on autopilot standing, hands raised high, fingers spread wide. Every lesson his father taught him, every warning from every black man he'd ever known, flooded his brain at once. Don't move too fast. Don't reach for anything. Keep your hands visible. Stay calm. Stay alive. Officers, there's been a mistake. Stephen's voice cracked. I work for Miss Greenwood. I drove her home last night because she was intoxicated. She asked me to stay because it was late. Turn around. Hands behind your back. Please, just listen to me. Now, Stephen turned. The metal cuffs were cold against his wrists, clicking shut with mechanical precision. Miss Greenwood, please. He twisted to look at her over his shoulder. She was still standing in the doorway, coffee mug held delicately in both hands, watching him like he was a stranger. You remember, the Christmas party. You couldn't find your keys. I drove you home in your Lexus. Helen tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. Then she spoke, and her words were like knives. Did you think I wouldn't notice? Stephen's blood ran cold. Notice what? I didn't do anything. A strange man. In my house. In my guest room. She took another sip of coffee. Perfectly calm now. I woke up with gaps in my memory, Stephen. Hours I can't account for. And you're here. In my home. While I was unconscious upstairs. Because you asked me to stay. I don't remember that. Her voice was flat, final. And if I don't remember it, how can anyone prove it happened? The officers were already moving Stephen toward the door. He tried to plant his feet, but they were stronger, more practiced at this. You've got to be kidding me. Miss Greenwood, tell them the truth. One of the officers, a tall white man with a crew cut and cold blue eyes, grabbed Stephen's arm tighter. Sir, you have the right to remain silent. I don't need to remain silent, because I didn't do anything. Stephen's voice rose, desperation bleeding through. Check your security cameras. They'll show everything. Me helping her inside, going straight to the guest room. We'll handle the investigation. The officer cut him off. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. This is insane. Stephen twisted again to look at Helen, who hadn't moved from the doorway. She was backlit by the morning sun streaming through the hallway windows, her face half in shadow. Why are you doing this? I was helping you. For just a moment, a split second, something flickered across Helen's face. Uncertainty? Guilt? But then it was gone, replaced by that same cold, distant expression. I woke up afraid, she said quietly. I woke up in my own home, terrified, with a man I don't remember inviting. That's all I know. That's a lie, and you know it. Enough! The officer yanked Stephen backward. You have the right to an attorney. They dragged him through the hallway, past the expensive paintings and the marble columns, into the foyer, where more officers were documenting everything with cameras and notepads. Stephen caught a glimpse of himself in the massive mirror by the front door. A black man in handcuffs, surrounded by white officers, being pulled out of a white woman's mansion. He looked exactly like what America expected him to be. My daughter, Stephen said, his voice breaking. She doesn't know where I am. You'll get your phone call at the station. They shoved him through the front door into the blinding morning sunlight. Neighbors were already gathering on their pristine lawns, watching from behind their iron gates. Stephen could see them whispering, pointing, pulling out their phones to record. I didn't do anything, Stephen shouted, not caring anymore who heard. I was helping her. I drove her home. But the officers weren't listening. They pushed his head down and guided him into the back of the patrol car. The door slammed shut with a heavy, final thunk. Through the window, Stephen could see Helen still standing in her doorway, coffee mug in hand, watching him with those cold, unreadable eyes, and in that moment, Stephen Booker understood with perfect, devastating clarity. It didn't matter what he'd actually done. It didn't matter that he'd been a good Samaritan, that he'd probably saved her life by keeping her off the road. All that mattered was the story Helen had decided to tell. And in America, when a wealthy white woman says she's afraid of a black man in her home, the truth becomes whatever she needs it to be. The patrol car pulled away from the mansion, sirens wailing. Stephen pressed his forehead against the window and closed his eyes. Somewhere in Charlotte, Amara was probably waking up, wondering where her daddy was. Stephen had no idea how he was going to explain this to his little girl, or if he'd ever get the chance to. The Mecklenburg County patrol car smelled like stale coffee and institutional disinfectant. Stephen sat in the back cage, wrists burning from the cuffs digging into his skin, watching Charlotte's skyline emerge through the morning haze as they drove back toward the city. The officer in the passenger seat nameplate read, Morrison, kept glancing back at him through the metal grate. Finally, he spoke. You got anyone we should call? Lawyer? Stephen's throat felt like sandpaper. I need to call my daughter's babysitter. She's 8. She doesn't know where I am. Morrison exchanged a look with the driver. "You'll get your call at the station. Please." Stephen hated the desperation in his voice, but he couldn't stop it. "She's going to wake up scared. She's going to think something happened to me. Should have thought about that before you." "Before I what?" Stephen lurched forward against his seatbelt. "Before I stopped my boss from driving drunk? Before I made sure she got home safe? Before I did the right thing?" The driver, a younger guy, with a buzz cut, finally spoke. "The right thing would have been calling her a cab, buddy. She wouldn't take one. She was stumbling. I was trying to help." Morrison turned fully around now, studying Stephen through the grate with cold cop eyes. "Here's what I don't get. You drive this woman all the way out to Weddington, that's what, 45 minutes? It's after midnight. You're exhausted, but instead of driving straight home to your kid, you decide to spend the night in your drunk boss's guest room." He paused. "That sound like good judgment to you?" Stephen's hands were shaking. "She asked me to stay. She said it was too dangerous to drive back that late." "Convenient? It's the truth." The car pulled into the parking garage of the Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Office. Stephen could see other patrol cars, officers coming and going, the mechanical efficiency of a system that had processed thousands of men who looked just like him. Morrison opened the back door. "Come on. Let's go." They walked Stephen through the garage, up a ramp, through double doors, into a fluorescent-lit hallway that felt like a hospital, and a prison had a baby. Other officers passed them, barely glancing at Stephen. Just another arrest. Just another black man in cuffs on a Friday morning. They stopped at a desk where a bored-looking sergeant took his information. Name? Stephen Marcus Booker. Address? 2847 West Boulevard, Charlotte. Occupation? Stephen's voice cracked. Facilities manager? Greenwood Financial? The sergeant looked up for the first time, one eyebrow raised. "The victim's company? She's not a victim." "I didn't." "Date of birth?" They took his wallet. His phone, his watch, the Timex Amara, had given him last Father's Day with her allowance money. They made him empty his pockets, a half-empty pack of gum, his car keys, a receipt from Amara's school book fare. Everything that made him Stephen Booker, father and human being, went into a plastic bag with a number on it. Then they led him to a small interrogation room. Cinder-block walls painted institutional beige, a metal table bolted to the floor, 2 chairs, and a mirror that was definitely one-way glass. "Wait here." The door closed with a heavy click. Stephen sat down and immediately stood back up. His heart was hammering so hard he could feel it in his teeth. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. He thought about Amara waking up at Miss Rose's apartment, asking where Daddy was. He thought about his phone now, in that plastic bag, buzzing with increasingly frantic texts he couldn't answer. The door opened. A white man in his 50s walked in, detective shield clipped to his belt, carrying a folder and a styrofoam cup of coffee. He had the weathered face of someone who'd seen every lie, every excuse, every manipulation the world had to offer. He sat down across from Stephen and smiled the kind of smile a shark might give a seal. "Mr. Booker, I'm Detective Ryan Kowalski. Let's talk about last night." And in that moment, looking into Kowalski's eyes, Stephen realized something that made his blood turn to ice. This man had already decided Stephen was guilty. Detective Kowalski took a slow sip of his coffee, never breaking eye contact. He set the cup down with deliberate precision and opened the folder. Stephen could see his own driver's license photo clipped to the top page. "Let's start simple. You work for Helen Greenwood?" "Yes." "Facilities manager." "Good job?" "It's fine. It pays the bills." Kowalski nodded, writing something down. "And last night was the company Christmas party. At the Ritz-Carlton." "Yes." "How much did you drink?" Stephen blinked. "Nothing. I don't drink at work functions." "Really? Not even one beer?" Glass of wine? No, I was driving, and I had to get home to my daughter. Kowalski leaned back, studying him. Because Miss Greenwood needed help. She was completely wasted, Detective. She couldn't even stand up straight. She was about to drive home drunk, and I stopped her. How noble. Kowalski's voice was flat, mocking. So you just drove her home, out of the goodness of your heart? Yes. What was I supposed to do? Let her kill herself? Kill someone else? You could have called her a cab, an Uber. Hell, you could have called one of her executive friends at that party. Stephen's jaw clenched. She refused the cab, and her executive friends were too busy networking to notice she was barely conscious. But you noticed. Of course I noticed. And then you volunteered to drive her. 45 minutes. To her mansion, alone. Kowalski leaned forward now, elbows on the table. That's interesting, don't you think? The facilities guy? The black guy. Offering to drive the white VP home? Stephen felt heat rising in his chest. What exactly are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm asking questions. Kowalski flipped a page in his folder. So, you get to her house. It's after midnight. You help her inside. Then what? I helped her upstairs to her bedroom. She could barely walk. I made sure she got there safely. Into her bedroom. Yes. Did you go into the bedroom with her? Just to the doorway. She sat on her bed. I made sure she was okay. And I left. Kowalski wrote something down, his pen scratching loudly in the small room. And then you just stayed overnight in your boss's house. Alone with her. She asked me to stay. It was almost 1 a.m. She said it was too dangerous to drive back in the dark. She told me to use the guest room. Why didn't you call anyone? Text anyone? Document this? The question hit Stephen like a punch. He opened his mouth, closed it. Why didn't he? I texted my daughter's babysitter earlier that night. Told her I'd be late. But you didn't tell her you were staying at your boss's house? No. Why not? Stephen's hands were shaking under the table. I don't know. I didn't think I needed to. I thought. You thought what? Kowalski's eyes were sharp, predatory. That nobody would find out? That it would be your little secret? No! I thought doing the right thing would be obvious. I thought. Stephen's voice broke. I thought decency was self-evident. Kowalski sat back, exchanging a glance with the mirror. Then he looked back at Stephen, and something in his expression shifted harder, colder. Let me paint you a picture, Mr. Booker. Black man, white woman, alone in her house all night. She wakes up with memory gaps, feeling violated. She can't remember what happened. And you're there. Fully clothed. You say, but that doesn't mean much, does it? This is insane. You see how this looks? Stephen stared at the detective, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might explode. He saw exactly how this looked. In the eyes of the law, in the eyes of the media, in the eyes of everyone who would hear this story, he wasn't Stephen Booker, loving father and responsible employee. He was the dangerous black man who'd invaded a white woman's home, and nothing he said was going to change that. Kowalski pulled out another piece of paper from his folder, sliding it across the table. Miss Greenwood went to the hospital this morning for a rape kit examination. Stephen's world stopped. Stephen's hands went numb. A rape kit? I didn't touch her. Kowalski slid a photograph across the table. Helen, in a hospital gown, looking small and terrified. She says she has bruises on her arms, marks she can't explain. From me, helping her walk. She could barely stand. I had to catch her on the stairs. Or from you holding her down. No? The interrogation lasted 4 more hours. Same questions, different angles. Kowalski circling like a vulture, picking apart every detail, twisting every answer into something dark and predatory. By the time they processed him, fingerprints, mugshot, the humiliating squat, and cough in front of bored corrections officers. Stephen had been awake for 26 hours straight. They held him for 72 hours before his bail hearing. Reverend Thompson and the Greater Faith congregation pooled money for the bondsman. $20,000 Stephen didn't have. He walked out of Mecklenburg County Jail on a Tuesday afternoon, blinking in the sunlight like something crawling out of a cave. His phone had 63 missed calls. The first voicemail was from Patricia Hayes, Keisha's mother. "Stephen, I'm filing for emergency custody. I can't have Amara around this Ander situation. I'm sorry." The second was from Greenwood Financial HR. "Your employment has been terminated effective immediately." The third was from Miss Rosa, Amara's babysitter, crying, "Mijo, I'm so sorry." Patricia came and took her. "Amara was screaming for you. I couldn't stop her. I'm so sorry." Stephen stood in the jail parking lot, phone pressed to his ear, listening to his daughter's babysitter sob. Everything was gone. His job, his reputation, his freedom hung by a thread. And now, they were coming for Amara. 2 days later, Stephen stood in family court while Judge Morrison granted Patricia temporary custody. He watched his daughter's grandmother family for 8 years look at him like he was a monster. "Your Honor, please. My daughter needs me." The gavel came down like a gunshot. That night, Stephen tried to FaceTime Amara. Patricia's face appeared instead, cold as winter. "You're not talking to her until you clear your name. Please, Patricia. She needs to hear my voice." The screen went black. Stephen stared at his phone in his empty apartment. Somewhere in Charlotte, his little girl was crying herself to sleep, wondering where Daddy went, and Stephen had no idea how to get her back. Stephen stared at the black screen of his phone for 10 minutes straight, Patricia's final words echoing in his skull. "You're not talking to her until you clear your name." Clear his name. How was he supposed to do that when the entire system had already decided he was guilty? His apartment felt like a tomb. Amara's backpack still sat by the door, where she'd left it Friday morning before school a lifetime ago. Her Captain America lunchbox on the kitchen counter. Her drawing of the two of them taped to the fridge, both of them smiling under a yellow sun she'd colored outside the lines. Stephen's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. "Mr. Booker? This is Jordan Martinez. I'm your public defender. I can't afford a lawyer. That's why they assigned me. Public Defender's Office. Can I come see you? Tonight?" Stephen looked around his apartment. The mess, the despair, the evidence of a life falling apart. "Sure, why not? I've got nothing but time." She showed up 40 minutes later with a messenger bag, a Starbucks cup, and bags under her eyes that said she was carrying about 50 other cases just like his. She looked young, maybe 30, but her eyes were old. Jordan sat on his couch, pulled out a yellow legal pad. "Okay, I've read everything. Police report, complaint, your statement at the station. I'm going to be honest with you. Stephen, this looks bad. I didn't do it. I believe you. But belief doesn't win cases. Evidence does." She clicked her pen, ready to write. "I need you to walk me through that night one more time. Every single detail. What you remember, what you saw, what you did." Stephen told her everything. The party. Helen stumbling drunk. The drive through dark country roads, helping her into the mansion. The stairs. The bedroom doorway. The guest room. Jordan was writing furiously, filling pages. Then, suddenly she stopped. Pen frozen mid-stroke. "Wait. Back up. When you helped her inside the house, her front door, the hallway, did you see security cameras?" Stephen's mind rewound to that night, standing in Helen's massive foyer, exhausted, trying to keep her upright. Yeah, I remember. There was one above the front door. Maybe another one in the hallway near the stairs? Jordan's eyes went wide. Stephen. If those cameras were recording, they'd show everything. Everything. Jordan was already pulling out her laptop. They'd show exactly what happened. You helping her. Where you went. Where you didn't go. Hope flickered in Stephen's chest for the first time in days, small and fragile, like a candle in a hurricane. Can we get the footage? I'm filing for a warrant first thing tomorrow morning. Jordan was typing notes rapidly. Helen's lawyers will fight it. They'll claim privacy invasion, but if the judge grants it, we might have your proof. 2 days later, Jordan called him at 10 p.m. Get to my office now. The footage came through. Stephen drove through empty Charlotte streets, barely breathing, not daring to hope too much. Jordan's office was cramped and cluttered, files everywhere, a dying plant on the windowsill. Her laptop was open, a video file queued up. Watch. She hit play. Timestamp. 12:51 a.m. Stephen helping Helen through the front door, her body weight sagging against him. His movements careful, cautious, one hand on her elbow, barely touching her back. Timestamp. 12:54 a.m. Hallway camera showing Stephen guiding Helen toward the stairs. She stumbled. He caught her, steadied her, kept distance. Timestamp. 12:58 a.m. Upstairs. Stephen, at Helen's bedroom doorway, clearly visible. She went inside. He stayed outside. 30 seconds. Then he walked away. Timestamp. 1:04 a.m. Stephen entering the guest room. Alone. Jordan fast-forwarded through hours of footage. A closed guest room door. Nothing. No movement between rooms. No contact. Timestamp. 6:31 a.m. Stephen emerging, fully clothed, looking confused. No assault. No contact. Nothing happened. Jordan paused the video. This proves you're innocent. Stephen's knees buckled. He grabbed the desk to keep from falling, his whole body shaking. Oh my God. Oh my God. This proves it. I can get Amara back. Hold on. Let me send this to the prosecutor first. The meeting happened the next afternoon. Conference room at the DA's office. Jordan, Stephen, Assistant District Attorney Michelle Park, Detective Kowalski, and Helen's attorney, a silver-haired shark named Robert Caldwell in a suit that cost more than Stephen's car. Jordan played the footage. Park watched silently, face unreadable. Kowalski's jaw clenched tighter with each timestamp. When it ended, Jordan closed her laptop with a sharp click. Your case is dead, Michelle. No assault, no contact, no crime. Drop the charges now. Park was quiet, studying her notes. Finally, she nodded slowly. I'll need to talk to my supervisor, but yes, I think we're done here. Stephen exhaled for what felt like the first time in a week. But then Caldwell spoke. The footage doesn't show what happened after Mr. Booker entered that room. It doesn't show Miss Greenwood's emotional experience. She still woke up feeling violated, traumatized by finding a man in her home. He smiled cold, professional, deadly. That trauma is real, regardless of what the cameras show. Jordan's face flushed red. Are you serious right now? The cameras prove. They prove he helped her inside. They don't prove she consented to him staying overnight while she was incapacitated. Caldwell leaned back in his chair. My client's mental state, her fear, her sense of violation, those are valid and actionable. Stephen felt the floor drop out from under him. Even with proof, even with video evidence of his innocence, Helen's story could still destroy him. Michelle Park called Jordan 3 days later. We're not dropping the charges. Caldwell's pushing a civil suit for emotional distress. This is going to trial. Stephen sat in Jordan's cramped office, watching his last shred of hope disintegrate. But the video doesn't matter. Not anymore. Caldwell's framing this as trauma, violation of trust, emotional harm. He's got expert witnesses lined up to testify about Helen's psychological state. Jordan rubbed her temples. We need something stronger. Like what? A signed confession? Jordan looked up, eyes sharp. Actually, Helen's medical records. If she's been treated for anything substance abuse, mental health issues, memory problems, it could explain the false accusation. How do we get those? We subpoena her therapist. It took 2 weeks of legal wrangling, but Judge Harrison finally signed the order. Dr. Sarah Chen, Helen's therapist of 3 years, was compelled to testify. The preliminary hearing happened on a gray February morning. Stephen sat at the defense table in his funeral suit, watching Helen enter with Caldwell. She looked smaller somehow, frailer. She wouldn't meet his eyes. Dr. Chen took the stand. An Asian woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and a crisp blazer. She was sworn in, sat down, folded her hands in her lap. Jordan stood. Dr. Chen, how long have you been treating Helen Greenwood? 3 years and 4 months. And what is the nature of her treatment? Caldwell shot up. Objection! Patient confidentiality. Judge Harrison didn't even look at him. Overruled. Miss Greenwood waived confidentiality when she filed criminal charges based on alleged trauma. Dr. Chen, you may answer. Dr. Chen took a breath. Miss Greenwood has been in treatment for alcohol dependency and associated memory issues. The courtroom went still. Jordan stepped closer. Memory issues. Can you elaborate? Helen suffers from alcoholic blackouts, periods where she consumes enough alcohol that her brain stops forming new memories. During these episodes, she can appear functional but has no recollection of events afterward. How often do these blackouts occur? Before treatment, several times a month. Even with treatment, they still happen when she relapses. Stephen's heart was pounding. Jordan continued, her voice steady and precise. Dr. Chen, in your professional experience treating Miss Greenwood, have these blackouts ever resulted in false memories? Dr. Chen hesitated, then nodded. Yes, 3 documented instances. When Helen experiences a blackout and wakes with memory gaps, her brain sometimes constructs narratives to fill those gaps, usually fear-based scenarios. Fear-based scenarios, Jordan repeated. Can you give an example? Last year, Helen woke up in her car in a parking garage with no memory of how she got there. She became convinced someone had drugged her and moved her car. Security footage showed she'd driven there herself while intoxicated. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Judge Harrison banged his gavel once. Jordan moved in for the kill. Dr. Chen, based on your treatment of Miss Greenwood, your knowledge of her condition, and the facts of this case, is it possible that Helen experienced an alcoholic blackout the night of December 19th, woke up to find Mr. Booker in her home, and her brain constructed a false assault narrative to explain what she couldn't remember? Dr. Chen looked directly at Helen, sympathy and sadness in her eyes. It's not just possible, it's probable. The courtroom erupted. Caldwell was on his feet, objecting. Judge Harrison was banging his gavel. Reporters in the back were typing furiously on their phones, but Stephen only saw Helen. She sat in the front row of the gallery, Caldwell's legal team surrounding her like bodyguards. Her face had gone white. Her hands were shaking. She was staring at Dr. Chen like she'd been struck. Then Helen buried her face in her hands and whispered something Stephen almost didn't hear over the chaos. I don't know anymore. Maybe I was wrong. Too late. Too late for Stephen's job. Too late for the weeks he'd lost with Amara. Too late for his reputation. his savings, his sense of safety in the world. Jordan sat down next to him, squeezing his shoulder. "We've got her. The prosecutor will drop this now." But Stephen couldn't feel relief. He could only feel the weight of everything Helen's fear had destroyed. Michelle Park requested a recess. 30 minutes later, she emerged from chambers with Judge Harrison and made the announcement. "The state is dropping all charges against Stephen Booker, effective immediately." Stephen stood, dizzy, not quite believing it. "You're free to go, Mr. Booker," Judge Harrison said. "This court apologizes for the ordeal you've endured." Free. He was free. But as Stephen walked out of that courtroom, past the reporters shouting questions, past Helen sobbing into Caldwell's expensive suit, past the people staring at him like he was either a monster or a victim, he wasn't sure which. He realized something that made his chest hollow out. Freedom wasn't the same as justice, and nothing would ever be the same again. Stephen walked out of the Mecklenburg County Courthouse into blinding February sunlight. Reverend Thompson's hand steady on his shoulder, Jordan Martinez on his other side. The courthouse steps were packed reporters, cameras, microphones thrust forward like weapons. "Mr. Booker, how does it feel to be exonerated? Mr. Booker, will you be suing Miss Greenwood? Mr. Booker, what do you want to say to Helen Greenwood?" Stephen stopped halfway down the steps. Jordan squeezed his arm, a warning. "Don't say anything. Let me handle this." But Stephen had been silent for 2 months. 2 months of being called a rapist, a predator, a monster. 2 months of losing his daughter, his job, his name. He stepped up to the microphones. "Mr. Booker, Helen Greenwood released a statement this morning. Have you seen it?" Stephen's jaw tightened. He'd seen it. Jordan had shown him on her phone 20 minutes ago. "I deeply regret the confusion and pain caused by my memory gaps during a difficult personal time. I wish Mr. Booker well in his future endeavors and hope we can all move forward with grace and understanding." Confusion. Memory gaps. A difficult personal time. Not "I lied." Not "I was wrong." Not "I destroyed an innocent man because I couldn't remember my own drunken mistakes." A reporter pushed forward. "Mr. Booker, what's your response to her apology?" "Apology?" Stephen's voice cut through the February air like broken glass. "That wasn't an apology. That was a press release written by expensive lawyers to protect a guilty woman from consequences." Jordan's hand tightened on his arm. The cameras were eating this up. "How do I feel?" Stephen continued, his voice gaining strength. "I feel like America just showed me again that a white woman's hangover is worth more than a black man's entire life." Helen Greenwood woke up scared. And that fear was enough to arrest me, charge me, take away my daughter, destroy my career, and drag my name through the mud for 2 months. The reporters were silent now, cameras rolling. She made a mistake. She created a false memory because she was too drunk to remember the truth. And for that mistake, that blackout she chose when she decided to drink herself unconscious, I lost everything. My job, my savings, 2 months with my daughter. Stephen's voice cracked. "Do you know what it's like to tell your 8-year-old that she can't come home because Daddy's been accused of something he didn't do? To watch your child cry on a video call and not be able to hold her?" Reverend Thompson's hand was firm on his shoulder now, grounding him. "Helen Greenwood will face no charges, no consequences. She'll resign with full severance, check into some luxury rehab facility, and disappear. Meanwhile, my mugshot is the first thing that comes up when anyone Googles my name. Arrested for sexual assault, even though the charges were dropped. That will follow me forever. Mr. Booker." Stephen looked directly into the nearest camera. "What's next? I'm going to fight for every black man who's been accused, convicted, destroyed by a system that believes white women's tears over our testimony. For every father who's lost his children because of a lie. For everyone who thinks doing the right thing will protect them. I'm here to tell you, it won't. Not in this country. Not if you look like me. Are you suing? Yes. For defamation? Emotional distress? Loss of income? Everything Jordan can throw at her, not because money will fix this, but because it's the only consequence Helen Greenwood will ever face. Helen's second lawsuit dragged on for 18 months. Depositions, motions, endless legal fees that second-chance defense couldn't afford. Jordan fought every inch, but Caldwell's firm had infinite resources and one goal: bury Stephen Booker so deep he'd never surface again. Then, suddenly, Helen dropped the suit. No explanation. Just a terse legal filing in August, stating the plaintiff was withdrawing all claims. Stephen didn't celebrate. He'd learned by now that Helen's retreats meant nothing. The damage was already done. 18 months of legal hell. Donors scared away from second-chance defense. Media coverage painting him as the villain in a he said, she said, nobody could ever really know the truth about. But the work continued. Stephen and Jordan helped 37 men in those 18 months. Some cases won, some lost. All of them fought like their lives depended on it because they did. 3 years after that courthouse speech, Stephen was in the second-chance defense office, bigger now. 4 full-time staff. Actual funding from a coalition of civil rights organizations when the mail came. A plain manila envelope. No return address. Postmarked from Santa Barbara, California. Stephen opened it with the letter opener Amara had given him for his birthday. Inside was a single piece of cream-colored stationery, handwritten in elegant script. Stephen, I've been sober for 2 years now. Real sobriety. This time, not just checking into a facility and disappearing. Dr. Chen has been helping me understand what I did to you. What I did to myself. I woke up afraid that morning, and I let that fear become your nightmare. I couldn't remember, so my brain created a memory that made sense to me, a dangerous man in my house. A violation I couldn't name. I never stopped to ask if you were telling the truth. I just assumed the worst, because that's what my fear told me to do. I destroyed your life, because I was too ashamed to admit I'd blacked out again. Too afraid to face my own failures. So I made you the monster, instead of confronting the monster I'd become. I know you probably hate me. You should. I know this letter doesn't undo the job you lost. The time with your daughter I stole. The reputation I destroyed. I know, sorry, is just a word that comes too late to matter. But I need you to know. I believe you now. I believe you then. I should have believed you from the beginning. I'm sorry, Stephen, for everything. I hope you and Amara are okay. Helen. Stephen read the letter 3 times. His hands were shaking by the end. He thought about calling her, screaming at her, asking her why it took 3 years and 2 lawsuits for her to find the courage to tell the truth. But what would be the point? Stephen folded the letter carefully, opened the bottom drawer of his desk, the one where he kept Amara's drawings, Keisha's wedding ring, the newspaper clipping of his congressional testimony, and placed Helen's letter inside. Another apology that came too late. Another, I'm sorry, that couldn't undo the past. He closed the drawer. His computer dinged an email from a public defender in Durham. New case. Young black man, 23 years old, accused by his ex-girlfriend of assault after a bad breakup. Security footage proved he was somewhere else that night, but the DA was pushing forward anyway. Stephen opened the file and started reading. Because that's what you did. You kept going. You kept fighting. Helen Greenwood had her apology, her sobriety. But Stephen Booker had something more important. He had purpose. He had Amara. He had the 37 men, now 38, who wouldn't have to face the nightmare alone. He picked up the phone and called the Durham public defender. This is Stephen Booker, from Second Chance Defense. Tell me about your client. The work continued. Because it had to. Because somewhere in America right now, another innocent man was being arrested. Another father was losing his daughter. Another life was being destroyed by fear, assumption, and a system that decided guilt before evidence. And Stephen Booker would be there to fight for them. Because if he didn't, who would? If this story made you angry, made you think, made you realize how easily an innocent life can be destroyed, then share it. Share it so more people understand what men like Stephen face every single day. Share it so we can start conversations about false accusations, racial bias, and a justice system that values fear over facts. Like this video if you believe the truth matters, if you believe innocent people deserve better, if you believe one person's nightmare should never be dismissed just because it makes us uncomfortable. And subscribe, because Stephen's story isn't unique. There are thousands of stories like his that never get told. Thousands of innocent people destroyed by accusations they can't defend against. Subscribe so you never miss another story that needs to be heard. Don't let Stephen's sacrifice be for nothing. Don't let this story disappear into the algorithm. Share it. Like it. Subscribe. Because the next Stephen Booker might be your brother, your father, your son, and when that day comes, you'll wish someone had been paying attention. The truth only wins when people are brave enough to share it. Be brave. Share this story.